Hey folks, welcome back to the Railguns and Dragons Reborn podcast. I'm Vince, and this is the second episode in our new to RIFTS Start Here series. In the first episode, we talked about why I think Chaos Earth is one of the best places for a new player to begin learning RIFTS. It gives you a familiar world and puts you right in the middle of disaster and lets you discover all the strange parts of RIFTS alongside the people who are experiencing them for the first time. So today, we need to step back a little and talk about what the familiar world actually looks like. Because when you hear the name Chaos Earth, it's easy to think the setting begins with the apocalypse, right? Well, it really doesn't. The story begins one day earlier, before the rifts opened, before the ley lines erupted, and before the creatures from other dimensions started pouring into our world. Humanity already built something remarkable. This was not simply our modern world with a better cell phone or a few robots and some flying cars. By 2098, humanity believed it had entered a golden age. People were living longer, diseases that had, previously terrified generations were being deleted or defeated. Cybernetics, genetic engineering, robotics, AI, and nanotechnology were changing ordinary life for everybody around us. Humanity had permanent stations orbiting the Earth. There were colonies on the moon. There was even a small outpost on Mars. Massive cities covered portions of the planet. Skyscrapers regularly climbed more than 100 stories into the air. Hover vehicles had largely replaced ordinary cars. Let's talk about the Jetsons here, that type of thing. Yeah, I'm showing my age. And new construction materials made highways last far longer than anything we know today. Human civilization had not merely survived the 21st century, it had flourished at this point. And that is one of the most important things to understand about Chaos Earth. This is not a world that had already fallen apart before the apocalypse arrived. Humanity did not destroy itself over things because it completely failed at this or that. It had reached the highest point in its history, and we were looking to the stars and honestly believed the future belonged to us. Then the universe tore the future away. The world of 2098 was called the Golden Age of Man, and for once, that name was not completely exaggerated. Now, humanity had endured decades of terrorism, political instability, economic upheaval, and war during the 21st century. Eventually, the major powers became, exhausted by it. They began to cooperate. Nations started actually sharing technology, information, scientific research, and even resources. Something that's probably unheard of or thought about these days. Trade itself expanded across the planet. Countries that had once struggled became major economic powers now. The United States and Russia remained influential, but they were no longer standing on top of the world. Germany, India, China, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Argentina, Canada, and several other nations became major global powers at this point. The world was not perfect, and there was still poverty, there was still hostility, and there were still places suffering from injustice and all the other stuff. Chaos Earth never claims humanity had brought utopia, but those places had become exceptions rather than the condition of the entire planet. For most people, the future appeared stable, prosperous, and almost unlimited at this point. The medical advances alone would have seemed impossible to us now. The human genome had been mapped and could be manipulated, cloning was real, nanotechnology and advanced bionics had entered practical use. New treatment could slow the effect of aging and extend human life at this point. The book gives us an image of a 90-year-old person who looks like and feels like he's in his 30s. Think about what that would mean for everyday life. People were not simply living longer while becoming weak and dependent. They were remaining healthy and active and mentally sharp. Entire generations could remain in the workforce, continue their research, raise families, explore the world, contribute to society for decades longer than they could do today. Someone could begin like a new career in and work for 4 years and still have a healthy life ahead of them to start over and do something completely different if they wanted to. Like a scientist might spend, 60 years working on one field of research. A person could know their great-great-great-great-great-grandchild and still be healthy enough to take on an active role in their lives. Humanity was not just adding years to the end of life, it was changing what a human life meant. The oceans also had become a new frontier for medicine, farming, energy, and historical discovery. Now, space was becoming another thing. Earth had several international space stations. Private corporations were pushing robotics, AI, aerospace, engineering, and weapon development. The moon had permanent settlements, and Mars was no longer merely a distant dream. Humanity was beginning to become a thing of the past as far as living on Earth. Not in some theoretical future that might arrive a century later, it was already starting to happen. That changes how we should picture people living in Chaos Earth. They were not waiting for civilization to collapse at all. They were not wandering around saying that the end of the year or the end was near. Most of them believed that they were witnessing the beginning of humanity's greatest chapter, and this is where Chaos Earth becomes much more interesting than simply calling it Rifts before Rifts. The world before the apocalypse was advanced, but it was not peaceful in the way people often imagine the Golden Age. Humanity had solved many old problems, but it also created new ones. Now, technology had become part of daily life, but it also had become part of warfare. Cybernetics could help a person walk again, replace damaged organs, and restore sight, or extend human life. Now, the same technology can also turn a soldier into something faster, stronger, and far more dangerous than an ordinary human being. Robotics could build homes, maintain cities, and explore dangerous environments, and work in places people could not survive now at this point. It could also produce machines designed to hunt and kill. AI was helping manage transportation, communications, industry, military systems, and everything else. Genetic engineering promised to eliminate disease and improve the human body. It also opened doors to the experimentations the government and corporations did not want the public to know about. That is an important part of the setting. The Golden Age was real, but so were the shadows beneath it. Governments were still competing with one another. Corporations were becoming powerful enough to influence nations. Military research was being hidden behind private contracts, classified facilities, and claims of national security. The world had become wealthier and more advanced, but it had not stopped being human. There was still fear, there was still ambition, and there was still greed backing everything. There were still people looking at every new discovery and asking how it could be turned into a weapon. That's always going to be the fact, no matter what you do in life. The military powers of the world had started preparing for wars that had not even happened yet. Some of these preparations eventually became the equipment, armor, weapons, and vehicles that appear throughout Chaos Earth. And this is where we get Nema, and this is where they enter the picture. Although, we will give them their own episode later on, so I'll get more into detail about them later on. For now, the important thing to understand is that the North American governments had created an international military and emergency response organization equipped to deal with disasters, terrorism, and large-scale threats. Nema had advanced body armor, power armor, robotics, aircraft, communications, and trained personnel. From the perspective of people living in 2098, these forces represented security. If an earthquake struck, Nema could respond. If terrorists attacked, Nema was there. City was threatened, Nema was there. They were prepared for disasters as humanity understood them. They were prepared for just about anything possible. They were not prepared for magic, they were not prepared for the ley lines, and definitely they were not prepared for demons, monsters, alien creatures, and tears in reality left and right. In fact, no one could have predicted it, and no one was ready for it. And that's one of the strongest ideas of Chaos Earth. Humanity had built the most advanced civilization in history, and almost none of that progress could explain what the frig was even going on. Imagine being a scientist in that world, right? You understand genetics and nanotechnology and everything that's possibly advanced and beyond your ever dreamed thought. You've spent your entire life working in a civilization that believes everything can eventually be measured, tested, and understood, and then one night the sky changes. Everything begins pouring out of the ground. People who have never shown any unusual abilities start beginning doing the things that are basically impossible. Creatures appear that do not fit into any known branch of biology or books or anything. The dead, well, they don't stay dead. The laws of nature no longer seem reliable. Every scientific assumption you had made about the universe is suddenly now incomplete. That would be terrifying, not simply because the monsters are attacking suddenly out of nowhere, but because the world no longer works the way you thought it did. The people of Chaos Earth do not know what a ley line is, they do not know what a rift is, they don't even have generations of scholars that studying magic to know what those are, what magic is. They do not know which creature is an intelligent creature, or which are animals, or which are something far worse than that. When the first survivor sees something impossible, they do not have a Rift sourcebook sitting by them nearby to explain what the hell is even going on. They have to make, decisions with almost no information. Should they shoot it? Should they try to kill it? Should they run? Can it be reasoned with? Is it alien? Is it a mutation of some type? Is it an experiment that the government let go? Is it supernatural? They don't know. That's uncertainty is one of the reasons Chaos Earth works so well as an introduction to Rifts. Now, as a new player, you are allowed to be confused. You are supposed to be confused at this point. Your character is learning about, magic, monsters, dimension travel, and psychic abilities all the same time you as a player are learning it. You don't need to memorize hundreds of years of Rift history before you begin playing. You begin with a world that resembles ours somewhat, although far more advanced. And then you watch that world completely change into something different. The tragedy that is what the people are living through, it know exactly what they're losing. They remember hospitals that could treat almost any, injury. They remember clean cities filled with hover traffic and, how global communication worked and reliable power and food everywhere, emergency services, and governments that could be reached everywhere or anywhere. They remember these things, these simple things that are going to work. And then all of a sudden, all that stops. That is the difference between a person born centuries later in Rift's Earth versus a survivor of Chaos Earth. Someone born in the world of Rifts may see ruins and wonder what that ancient world was like. A Chaos Earth survivor remembers using those buildings. They remember eating in the restaurant. They remember, working in the towers. They remember the people who lived in their homes. To them, these ruins are not ancient history, they are things that they went to yesterday. And that is the world before Rifts. It's not a primitive world, not a world already in ruins. It's a world at the height of its power, and humanity has reached further, lived longer, built higher, and understood more than ever before. It had created machines that could think and medicine that could reshape the human body, and it was supposed to last forever. Then all of a sudden, overnight, all that confidence went poof. And I think that's what makes Chaos Earth such an effective starting point. I know I've said that, but I have to want to implant it in your head. Because you're not beginning in a strange future and trying to understand centuries of history. You are standing beside people who remember the old world and watching them confront the impossible for the first time. That's why I think it's a great way to get people into this whole thing and jump into the jump into the game and discover everything alongside your character. And anybody that's new should definitely pick up Chaos Earth. Start there with your group, start there slowly, and you can actually build your way in. So in the next episode of New to Rifts Start Here, we're going to look at, some things about combat and technology and survival, or even fear. I don't know. I got to look on my list, see what we're going to do. But until then, you can find more articles and episodes at railgunsanddragons.com. You can also find the video side of Railguns and Dragons on the Evil Dungeon Master YouTube channel, youtube.com/theevildm. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time, folks. Good night. You've been listening to Railguns and Dragons Reborn, a podcast about RIFTS. Head over to railgunsanddragons.com for more information.